first and foremost, thank you so much for doing this.
Oh, totally. I'm happy, more than happy to talk to you today.
Absolutely. Well, were you familiar with the Three Body Problem book before you joined the show?
I was not, and I was not prepared for the journey that is completing the book itself. There was a meeting that I had with the creators, Benioff, Weiss, and Alexander Wu, and then once I started the casting process, that's when I decided to finally venture in and try to familiarize myself with the book. And it took me 2 tries to do so. One reading the traditional way, which was just a task in itself. But then the second time to try to grasp the concepts even more, I did it through audiobook. That way I was able to listen to it whenever I was in the car driving around town and trying to get things done. So it helped the second time around much more than the first.
I mean, it is a very ambitious, very elaborate type of science fiction that I don't think
Totally.
we see much of anymore, and it asks a lot of very pertinent questions on
Mm-hmm.
humanity's connection to Earth. And so I'm wondering, what were your initial sort of thoughts on the concept of the show, and what drew you into wanting to be in this series?
Well, I thought the concepts were very complex, and it was something that I knew just off of paper that it would be a daunting task to complete. But when you put that task in the hands of people like David Benioff and Dan and Alex, you have to feel confident in what they're trying to create. And even from that first meeting that I had with them, you could really see that this was a project that they had really become familiar with. They had spent a lot of time trying to figure out how they were going to adapt it, how they were going to adapt the characters to make them more complex and diverse. And after I left their offices that first day, I was really excited to just get to be a part of it. I hadn't gotten information on who else was being cast at that point, just because it was so early on. But once I was in the later part of the process, or at least my process, and got to see who they were bringing on board as well, I was really excited. Now I'm a genuine fan of all of my castmates and the work that they've done in the past. So it was really fun to get to come together on this super team.
I mean, the show is amazing. I was hooked. I
Thank you.
binged it when it came out. Like, it was
Did you?
amazing.
That's awesome.
Yeah. So did you have any sort of I guess, what were your preliminary discussions like in terms of evolving Saul arc within the show with Benioff, Weiss, and Alexander Wu?
It was really refreshing, man. I think when you're working with power players, that's how I like to refer to them because of the success that all three of them have had in television. You wonder if you're going to be able to have I guess strong opinions on your characters and on the story. But it was really refreshing to see how collaborative they were with some of my ideas about what Saul was supposed to be and how his arc would grow over time. I think the biggest task for me was maintaining his, I guess, relatability. I think the one of the strongest things about him is that you do learn early on in the episodes that he's just as intelligent as the rest of his colleagues, but he seems to be more lax with how he approaches his day-to-day work and just how he lives his life. And I think in some of his scenes where you see him, like, I don't know if this is spoiler friendly, but if you see him like when he's in the bar or he's in the pub with his friends, he's someone that doesn't feel like he needs to, dangle the bell in front of people's faces that he's a brilliant mind. He just kind of wants to have a beer and hang out and meet new people. And I think that's something that's really cool about Saul. And I was excited to play because I think if you're playing like a police officer or an FBI agent or a doctor or something, I think sometimes it's tricky because actors feel like they have to look like a doctor and talk precise like a doctor or a lawyer or whatever the case may be. And I just think I was really lucky that that's who we refer to Dan, David, and Alex by, that they were very adamant about me just making him relatable and making him a human being, just a normal guy. So it was really fun to play.
I think that's what makes him very interesting because, at first he's a little skeptical about what's going on in the world, and he's quite laid back about it. He's like, oh, okay, the aliens are going to arrive in 400 years. What do I have to worry about? Let's just sit down,
Right.
smoke a joint, and that's it.
Right. We got time, baby.
So I guess the first part of this is like how did you react to how your character was being introduced within the series, and what did you like immediately want to establish about Saul for the audience's understanding of the character from the get-go?
Well, I think the most important thing for me in trying to figure out who Saul was just trying to figure out how he differs from me, which is quite obvious for myself when I read him on paper because I myself am incredibly ambitious in all aspects of my life, I like to think. So to play someone who lacks that, that was kind of my starting point, and that was basically the spine of work that I was doing for him. Having, and again, when you're dealing with showrunners like this where they've really done their homework, it makes it so much easier for the actor to come in and trust what's on the page. And I think that they did a great job in having Saul sort of be not the eyes, but just someone who is able to sit back and watch things develop before he gives his opinion or his insights. And I think that it's a refreshing contrast, especially when the bigger issue of the show kind of rears its head, because everyone is sort of like trying to figure out what this problem is and what they're dealing with the headset and what's going on in the world around them. And people have such strong opinions, people being my castmates, my colleagues, the Oxford Five, they all have their own insights about what's going on, how to handle it, that when everyone is kind of going back and forth at the same time, it's kind of everyone drowns out the noise from the other people. And I think when that's happening, what's really cool is to see Saul kind of sit back and let all that happen. And then he only really steps forward to give his opinion when he's asked for it, and when he's asked for it at a pivotal moment. So that's just something that I always tried to remember in scenes with my castmates when Saul appeared to be just kind of lacking vigilance or just lacking awareness. That's just kind of on the surface. But I think whenever you think he's not listening or paying attention, I think he absolutely is. So it's just being subtle in that way.
And it's also a show where the bond between the main characters is very close, and we do relate to Saul's friendship with Augie, Jin, and Will and Jack. I'm wondering, absolutely, how did you all work on creating that chemistry so it would feel as natural and as relatable as possible for the series?
It was fun, man, because I don't think that it felt like work at all. When we first got to England, I remember my chemistry read was with Alex Sharp, who plays Will, and he and I got a head start in conversations about our characters, just because we have a mutual friend that we didn't know was mutual until after the casting. And so he and I kind of dove in as far as talking to each other and hanging out and getting to know each other. But outside of that process, while we were in England, we were all hanging out outside of set. In the beginning of pre-production, Jess and I actually visited Oxford University and got to speak with some physics students who were getting their PhDs at the time. That was really helpful as well, because we got a chance to see what it would have been like for kids going in and getting their PhDs at the time, like all of our Oxford Five friends have. It's funny or it's not funny, but it's just really cool, I thought, is that normally it's a big class. It could be like, I don't know, 800 to how many people are in the curriculum at one time, but you have pods. And so it's very realistic to imagine that the Oxford Five was a pod and they went through their curriculum together. They might have gone to lectures with other physics students, but if they were in the same pod, they're spending all of their classroom time going through different, theoretical whatever about physics and spending all that time together. So it makes sense that it would have been really tight. And so I think we did it the best way we could, which was hanging out, going to dinner, going to, different sporting events and things like that, and just letting the bond happen naturally. And I think it did. And it made coming into set day in and day out so much easier.
And I really especially like Saul's friendship that he has with Will. He spends a lot of time with him after Jack gets killed in the third episode. He's always there for him as he undergoes treatment for his cancer. And I really like the scene in the seventh episode where Will is gonna die, and Saul is trying to ask him, are you sure you want to do this?
Yes,
I'm wondering if you can talk about how you and Alex wanted to develop that friendship within the show, and also about how that scene was.
Absolutely, yeah, that's one of my favorite scenes as well, just because I think that's probably one of the scenes that Alex and myself that we worked on the most. And again, we didn't overdo it. We didn't sit at the table and scene study it, by the book, writing, taking notes. We just spent a shit ton of time together, just hanging out, getting to know where his family's from, my family, his friends, and all that. I think what we wanted to do was make it apparent that this was, I imagine that we were friends in this, Oxford, our academic careers, but it's definitely established in the beginning of the show that Jack and Will were much closer. And I was the third buddy, and that's fine. That's just how friendships always go in these little, brackets. But through Will's grief and his grieving of Jack, it allowed a newer or closer friendship to establish between he and myself. And so doing that, we wanted it to be subtle, and we wanted to have it be like a kind of like flipping on a switch. So when we're in the scene, when we're in Jack's room and we're looking through all of his mementos and things like that, that's when we wanted to really make it clear that, oh, this is a new friendship. And as far as the not emancipation, the what do you call it? His death scene when he's trying to figure out if he's going to use the serum to kill himself. Again, it was just not trying to do too much written work, and that's how I can speak of it. I don't know if Alice would say something different, but as far as when we spent time together, it was just very important that we just spent natural time just getting to know each other and putting ourselves in those circumstances of losing someone that you love, no matter what, no matter how hard you try to convince them otherwise. And I know for a fact that it was one of my favorite film days just because we were able to just go. Jeremy, our director, really allowed us to just explore different ways to say the lines and to let the scene play out. And it was a very emotional day, very exhausting for Alex as well, just because of what he was putting himself through physically. And being able to show up on the day and see someone who's really created that imagery of someone who's just wasting away really does something to you. And I think it just really helped both of us to really sink into these characters and the circumstances and play it and have a good time doing it.
And so the show begins with Augie looking at the countdown in
Mm-hmm.
your eyes, and the finale, Saul at the front and center of it as he becomes targeted by the Santi, and he's named one of the wall facers by the United
Right.
Nations. It's very interesting because it's clear, like throughout the show, he doesn't really want to get involved in that whole conflict, and now here he is.
Right.
He's becoming the wall facer, and yes, sort of questions his own beliefs and grappled with that responsibility. I'm wondering, how did you want to sort of develop this evolution of the character in the finale, which really puts the show in a totally different direction than when it was introduced as.
Totally does. And I think it really, again, just happened really organically because of what was written. Our brilliant showrunners. It's like, this is a guy who we've probably recognized in our own lives, someone who has all of the natural gifts and abilities and has all of the tools necessary to have, for what it's worth, a very successful and meaningful life in his career or in his personal life. But for whatever reason, he just lacks that secret something that he needs to put into motion to be able to make that happen. And we see somebody that's like that the entire series, and then he literally gets appointed into like one of the most important jobs in like world history's existence. And it's kind of like it's fucking bizarre, right? It's like, how do you go from somebody who barely wants to do his full shift at work to being like the most important person in the world or one of three? And so seeing how he's trying to come to terms with that reality at the beginning of episode 8 was just fun to play, because it's just like, dude, you don't realize how important we need you to like do what you can do, what you have the capability to do. And no matter how much he runs from it, everybody around him is kind of like giving him this weird energy of like, you can say no, but you're going to do this job. And so it was really fun to get to kind of feel like this weird essence of people knowing I have this power, but trying not to offend me in my denial of the power. And again, I think it's really refreshing, because I think if we're fortunate to get to do another season, I think that audiences, including myself, being able to take an outside look into Saul's arc, I would like to see him rise to the occasion or not. And even with that, even if he does eventually rise to the occasion, I think it should be or shouldn't be without struggle and obstacles, because that's what makes for interesting drama, is to have a bit of hardship coming to the final stage of where he needs to be. So I'm really curious as to what is up for Saul if we get to continue telling that story, and I think fans will be curious about that as well.
And is there something that you would say was your favorite part of being on the show?
My favorite part of being on the show, a few things. I really enjoyed being in England. I'm going to spend a lot of time there. I have a lot of family there, so getting to be there. I'm really lucky in a lot of the jobs that I've done, that I've been a part of some really great casts. And I think, again, knock on wood, this is another opportunity that I was able to come on board to, where I got along with everyone, and we were all able to come into this knowing that it was something that we would all have to work incredibly hard on, but we were willing to do that because we all believed in what Benioff, Weiss, and we were creating. And I just think that that experience as a whole was something that is a core memory for me in my career. And yeah, it was a lot of fun, man. It was a lot of fun, and I'm really proud of it. Seeing what it has become as far as a spectacle, and as far as how the general audience is receiving it across the globe, is really freaking cool. It's really cool. So it's like, I mean, what else can I say? You know what I mean? It's awesome.
Yeah, it definitely is awesome. And the show is fantastic.
Thank you,
Once
man. Thank
again,
you.
it was really great talking to you today, Jovan, on your performance as Saul in Three Body Problem. Congratulations for a fantastic performance and a really, really amazing show.
Thanks, man. I appreciate taking the time for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I wish you all the best on your future projects and hope that you have a very good rest of your day.
Thanks, bro. You do the same.
Thank you.